Throughout much of my coverage during the 2023 Six Nations Championship, I was very open about England looking like a worse team without Marcus Smith in their starting lineup. With Smith forming a 10-12 axis in combination with Owen Farrell, the end of the Eddie Jones era was not the catastrophe the media made it out to be for England. The nature of England's backline can be very polarising to discuss, with several fans firmly entrenched with the belief that Farrell needs to retire, while others are out there wanting Smith to be dropped because of his flair. Then, there are the very few who understand that though England's set piece has improved recently, Steve Borthwick's attempts to fix something in the backline that isn't broken hasn't been ideal. Borthwick placed a single 10 on the field in 68% of the minutes available during the 2023 Six Nations. Refusing to continue down the path of Smith and Farrell's 10-12 axis, however, may be the key to England's inevitable Rugby World Cup downfall. Kia ora guys, welcome back to the Black Jersey. My name's Max, I'm the host of this channel, and today's video is, as I said in the intro, going to be about Marcus Smith at 10 and Owen Farrell at 12 being absolutely 100% necessary for the England game plan. Whether Steve Borthwick, the media and the pundits alike can admit it or not, England needs the both of them in the starting lineup to succeed, and so we're going to delve into the stats, what they've achieved together as a duo, and of course some of the footage to look at how this theory works in practice regarding an extra 10 and a 10-12 axis. It's worked very well for a varying amount of teams for a very long time. The All Blacks have had great success with Richie Mo'unga at 10 and David Havili over at 12, whereas the Irish have Robbie Henshaw with the skill set of a 10 and the size of a 12, Jonathan Dante the size of a flanker, the skill set of a 10, and the list could go on. But of course, unfortunately though, injury to Owen Farrell has meant they haven't played a ridiculous amount of minutes together. So for a total, they've played 599 minutes together under Eddie Jones, whereas they've played just 124 of a possible 400 under the Steve Borthwick era. They started together against Scotland, that game was a loss. Borthwick then abandoned the tactic and started to pick Ollie Lawrence, a more traditional centre, in the number 12 jersey, while continuing to pick Henry Slade, whereas when he started Smith against France, the team looked absolutely leaderless, and for a wee bit, they were looking a little bit better with Owen Farrell on the pitch until they just capsized and France put a record score up against the English. I'm going to look at some of the footage now that we've touched the surface on their history together, and I want to, as I explained earlier, explain how this whole theory works in practice. Let's get into the footage. Now that we've learned a little bit about the surface level differing usage of these two players from the approaches taken by two test level coaches, let's examine the in-game cohesion between both Smith and Farrell. In the first ever attack pattern that England uses with both players on the pitch, Farrell has slotted himself into the 10 channel, being a more experienced player that has played extensive rugby with Ben Youngs, Jamie George and Tom Curry, the spine components in England's set piece over here. Youngs, being the 9, calls for the team to go wide and he takes the quick tap, so Farrell enters the driver's seat to get Smith to watch and learn. We can see though that Smith very much has Farrell's support, as the black arrow indicates Smith is an available strike runner. Although Farrell has organised the attack structure that Youngs has called for, we can see just 3 Wallabies on Farrell's right, while he has 4 available runners on the outside channels of the pitch, thanks to Smith wrapping around to join the attack. While Len Ekitau reads the move, Smith has the attacking skills to continue going forward with a wee step. We freeze frame again at 6:24 to see that while a potential strike play has failed, Smith remains available to organise the 3 strike runners on the wing. As Australia have defenders out wide, Smith chooses to take the ball and use the other backs as initial ruck clearance options before Tom Curry attempts to generate Youngs the front foot ball he needs. While we see Youngs arriving, Farrell remains available to call the pod-shaped Sinclair in a toe-jay will form thanks to having an extra distributor step into his usual channel out wide. As Australia arrived in the ruck before Curry, they get the opportunity to form a flat rush defence line slightly in front of their own 22, so Farrell opts for England's forwards to take the shape of a 3-2-1-1 while Curry is the lone forward in the breakdown, with Eddie Jones's game plan establishing Courtney Lawes as the closest forward to Youngs. England's shape has some initial dynamic power that will put doubt into the minds of Australia. This illustration showcases that Lawes is in a reasonable carry position to cross the gain line and get the front foot ball back, while we can now swap to option 2 where he can work with Sinclair to send Farrell and Tuilagi into space. Lawes, however, takes a third attacking option to get Underhill over Hooper's inside shoulder. By pushing Underhill over the gain line, England now have the opportunity to create a shape from deep with more backs on their feet, wrapping around to the open side. Itoje's carry is then followed by Farrell taking the ball from first receiver in a position that most Kiwis and Aussies think should be used for a pure battering ram run. Unfortunately, unlike Thomas Umaga Jensen, Ngani Laumapi, Jack Goodhue, Roger Tuivasa, Sheck, Dallas McLeod, Hunter Paisami, Lalakai Foketi, Theo Tompkinson, Caleb Clark and Ray Nu'u, Owen Farrell is a highly intelligent player who can see the bigger picture while he's on the pitch, hence why he's played 55 tests with the number 12 shirt on his back. Many Southern Hemisphere fans would get visibly angry at Farrell for not following the black arrow for a big run up the guts to smash people, while the actual Wallabies themselves believe Farrell is going to run this line because A, we can see Rod and Lawes in a believable position to clean a ruck around Farrell, and B, Dave Rennie has extended the homogenous coaching of the Southern Hemisphere from schoolboy level all the way to international level. Rob Leota sprints in on Farrell, who stands there as bait, having not been told to do anything differently in his entire life as a rugby player. With the key decision maker for the team about to be tackled, Eddie Jones's England is still up and running though, courtesy of Marcus Smith at 10. In the wide shot we can now see 4 England attackers on the left, all running believable lines. Farrell, despite having played 90 tests by this point, has trusted Smith to insert himself into the attack, weigh up the option and then select who he believes is the best carrier for England to break through the very visible holes we can see here in Australia's defence line. Smith opts to use himself as an extra piece of bait to draw in Paisami, sending Stewart through the initial hole in the 13 channel. With shocking defence by Kurtley Beale, Stewart is over for the first try in the 7th minute, completing what is a superb execution from a 10-12 combo in their first test together. Although Australia's 20 penalties conceded, including 2 yellow cards, leads England to take the 3-pointer on 7 of the 11 times it was offered, we do indeed get some icing on the cake at the end of the game with a try to Jamie Blamire. This finished what was a very successful outing for the Farrell-Smith combo with a 32-15 win. As I said earlier though, Owen Farrell did have his fair share of injury troubles. He missed a victory over the Springboks in 2021 where Marcus Smith was an absolute standout. He then missed the whole of the 2022 Six Nations with a bit of a bad ankle. Smith in that tournament was the top point scorer of the competition, scoring 71 out of England's total point tally of 101 throughout the tournament. During that tournament, I was like, actually no guys, he's not the Finn Russell type 10 everyone's trying to say he is. Marcus Smith has excellent game management skills, so now let's see how that works when you try to reignite his combo with Owen Farrell. We got to see that in action at last when Farrell was recalled for the Tour of Australia in 2022. We are finally getting to see the man himself, Owen Farrell, back at test level with Smith still in the saddle at 10. Although Owen Farrell's rustiness was very evident during their 2022 mid-year series, 3 more tests against Australia provided a perfect chance for the 10-12 axis to rejuvenate their combination. Australia's 42 penalties in 3 tests did take a lot of England's flow away again as they did in 2021, as did Australia's 18 turnovers in 3 tests. What we got to see towards the end of the first test, with Farrell's body now acclimatised to test level again after 78 minutes, was brilliant. Although Jack van Poortvliet is at the bottom of this ruck, Joe Hayes does a solid fill-in job at halfback before the wide shot reveals to us that late in the game, the 10-12 axis is indeed starting to find its groove again. Smith has organised the scattered three-man pod outside him over here, while we see that Farrell is out the back. Smith sticks to the game plan and manages it incredibly well, resisting the urge to fire a chip kick down into the backfield that we could possibly see if this illustration happened in real time. As Farrell receives the pass, we now see that 6 Australians have been taken out of the defensive line by Smith's outside pod, who force a change in strategy for Australia. Farrell now sends the ball deep into the backfield, where Joe Marchant is the only England back that's reasonably marked right now. Through the incredible organisation of a pre-planned pattern, Stewart and Arundel basically have a free rise to enter the 22. Australia catch up with Stewart, though Callaway and Lolesio are found to be in a side-on tackle position. Arundel exploits the defence to cross the try line in his first touch in international rugby, using his individual brilliance to finish a beautiful setup that was so crazy underappreciated. It goes without saying that Arundel did phenomenally, but he couldn't have had the ball without the 10-12 axis and their input. While the 13-man Australia are defending their own try line, we can also see Smith commandeering the shape of the forwards as they try to use their pods and advance at the try line. We eventually see a real cheeky move from Smith, who holds Hooper at the ruck, which opens a gap in the defence line over here. Smith's recognised that Hooper has overcommitted numbers to the ruck, so holds him there to punish him, allowing Jack van Poortvliet to score a try on debut. I will admit here, guys, that the cohesion between the two was a little 50-50 in the second test of the series, but by the third, Smith and Farrell were a well-oiled machine of a 10-12 axis. While Farrell is indeed flat before pivoting to pass, we can see Smith switching around from the 10 channel and into the 13 channel, having travelled from where Sinclair is to right here where he's spotlit. He integrates himself into Porter's decoy line and puts his arms up to become a very believable distributor, and this ensures the 2-on-2 out wide will remain so that Freeman has the space at half time. Porter takes out Karevi, Smith takes out Lolesio, and now we see Hodge and Wright both standing inside on positions. With Freeman somehow not scoring the try, Farrell remains in frame, hiding behind the score graphics to dictate the shapes his forwards will take before Jamie George arrives to get in Van Poortvliet's ear and coach him on the pass that allows Freddie Stewart to score. Smith is, during this game, essentially just a second Farrell on the pitch, guaranteeing that every single play Farrell dictates will work or have a backup plan. We can later see him in the 10 channel having organised a backline formation on the open side should the forwards fail to score on the blind side where Farrell's eyes are looking to in this freeze frame. Smith's status as Farrell's quicker clone also extends into the defensive line, where he holds his line superbly to pick off a mistake by the Wallabies and score this pearler of a try. While many will write it off as a fluke caused by Australia, believing Australia is the actual name of their country, having a look into this phase from a different angle gives us a totally different metaphorical view of the try. We'll pause here, zoom in by 400%, and we can see, of course, the line out, but now we'll spotlight the formation of each line. Australia have Koroi Betty hiding behind the lineout for a possible strike play, while Lolesio has Karevi on his outside as a guaranteed crash ball runner. We'll now skip forward a few frames and we'll notice that all 5 players on the Wallabies open field are standing in a flat hands down the line formation, which is a schoolboy level tactic England perceive as easily readable. We now notice that Luke Cowan-Dickie has stood in to mark Koroi Betty to give him a proper wrapping tackle and push him backwards, while out in England's backfield, Lewis Ludlam is the closest player to Cowan-Dickie. England know that a 2013 crash ball running play with a Jamie Roberts is coming, so they have used Ludlam and Cowan-Dickie to negate the lines Koroi Betty and Karevi could run by following through with these defensive arrows. We can also see that Freddie Stewart has positioned himself to be able to come and sprint at both the Australian right wing as well as the space where we find Marcus Smith. Smith is between Ludlam and Farrell, who was looking to land a massive hit like the one he did on Andre Esterhazen. Smith is not marking anybody, so why Is he here? There's only a single possible direction that the ball can travel, as we've illustrated, so Smith puts Ludlam and Farrell into the positions where they can make the big hits, slotting himself in between so that he can time himself correctly to take this hypothetical pass by Karevi to right and score anyway. Even though Australia follow through to stuff their line out up big time, Smith is still in the position to pounce on the mistake, still scoring despite the outcome due to his phenomenal game management. The Argentina Test of 2022 was a great source of watching the value that Farrell can add from 12 in tight spaces too. We can see Billy Vunipola pass to Ben Youngs after the scrum, while Youngs has 3 huge players outside himself to pass to. The first is Joe Cokanasiga, a winger taking a line from the 10 channel, while Manu Tuilangi is available from 13, and Farrell is slotted between them as a distributor. We can see that 2 players have been drawn into Cokanasiga while Gonzalez is wrapping around to eye up Farrell, aware of the higher centre of gravity he possesses. Cokanasiga ends up running into Gonzalez, and now that a forward has began to handle him, Farrell sees the obstruction on Tuilangi by Matias Moroni, so without second thought charges full steam in the ruck formation, giving Cokanasiga a push that he needs to score. From another angle though, we can also see Smith. He's refraining from joining the attack and instead calling for Farrell to hold and then line up as a possible ruck clearance, seeing his own frame as detrimental to England's quick ball should Cokanasiga not score. We'll also zoom in and see that Smith's wraparound line also temporarily takes Geronimo Della Fuente into 2 minds, hence why his assistance to Juan Martin Gonzalez's tackle came late in the England strike play. The mere presence of an extra distributor, as we can see on the replay, is what allowed England to get away with the extra bulk in the backs. The late identification of Cokanasiga's line by Della Fuente is what created the uprightedness of the ruck that Farrell batted at to help Cokanasiga get the try. There's some communication from them ahead of Jack van Poortvliet's fluke of a try in the second half as well. There's no doubt about that. Smith and Farrell are an excellent duo behind a good pack. As soon as the reserve forwards came on for England against the All Blacks, it was the same thing. Smith and Farrell having a blinder of a game behind a better pack. For an example, look no further than this gap Smith creates and then runs through to set up Will Stewart for an eventual try. I'm also going to add in the deconstruction of the other 2 England tries against the All Blacks through adding in analysis I produced for a previous video. You'll easily be able to tell it's a 2022 upload being used since I'll colour this one in black and white. This particular segment of the video won't be as flashy in terms of editing, but will still demonstrate a clear-cut example of a killer attack structure run by Smith and Farrell. With Youngs on the field, England will analyse this far more calmly than with Van Poortvliet on the field, and knowing there is no chance of their first receiver being tackled while Bauer has not drifted wide enough, they're guaranteed space out wide. We shift to the wide shot and we can see that this is the case because not only do England have a huge amount of numbers out wide thanks to Bauer not drifting enough, but they also have plenty of decoy runners available thanks to a 2-3-2-1 pod structure, with Owen Farrell unlocking the space for Henry Slade to pass into as Marcus Smith organises the positioning of the 2-man pod in front of him. Mark Talia in just his second cap has pretty much no choice but to bite in, leaving Geordie Barrett to mark Marcus Smith, Guy Porter and an out of frame Johnny May all on his own. With the 2-man pod running perfect decoy lines to protect Smith, Guy Porter is able to hold the attention of Talia, who is side on. Though Talia has read England's game plan, the use of decoy runners to force Talia into a side on position means England are guaranteed a gain line success. After a nice wee dance, May's next step after receiving the pass is to take the ball into contact, knowing England's forward pack are far fitter, guaranteeing front foot ball at the next phase. George Bauer and Samisoni Taukeiaho refuse to enter the breakdown and slow England's ball, with Adi Savia the only Kiwi in the breakdown after he completes the tackle. Knowing the All Blacks have a wee bit of a problem identifying decoy runners, England pretty much imitates South Africa and Ireland by using decoys again at the next wide shot, with Itoje and Vunipola filling these roles. Itoje simply has to hold the ball and pass at the last second in order to bait Frizzell and Retallick. With Tom Curry also running a decoy line, Nepo Laulala is removed from the All Blacks defence line. Now that Laulala, Retallick and Frizzell are marking English dummy runners, the pass from Itoje goes backwards to Slade, and we now see that England have created a 7-on-4 scenario for themselves on attack. In order to keep as much space as possible on the open side, England use their pack to draw in Whitelock, Ioane and Lienert-Brown, with Marco Vunipola essentially filling in at centre, offloading to David Ribbons, who is then able to run through the defensive hole that Retallick's initial absence due to the tight carry has now created. While Lienert-Brown reads the play to send Ribbons into the gap, Ribbons' height advantage allows for just a beautiful offload for Owen Farrell, who has been the puppet master organising the second phase of attack all along. With TJ Perenara retreating and side on, Rico Ioane's drift out wide has made him the last man in the All Blacks' main defensive line. This entire series of play has all been devised in Eddie Jones' head, and thanks to Smith and Farrell's supreme intelligence, Ioane is in the exact position they need him to be for England's biggest attacking threat to run rampant. While some say Owen Farrell passed this ball a little bit too early, I don't actually think so at all. Due to Freddie Stewart having a way larger frame than Ioane and Mo'unga, I'd actually tend to think that this was timed perfectly, and it was timed at the correct time. We see an iconic Farrell pass out to the wing, and Ioane overcommits to the tackle, allowing for Stewart to step him and then drop his shoulder on Mo'unga, with this propelling Stewart over the All Blacks 22. With England now in prime attacking zone, their attack is already in shape by the time Youngs makes the pass out wide as the All Blacks defence continues to organise. England only need to play to what's in front of them now. Curry makes a very nice pass to send Vunipola over the gay line, drawing the All Blacks over to the open side, but with this happening, Stewart is able to call for the pass to go back from whence it came. Having been Young's teammate at Leicester Tigers, Stewart is trusted by Youngs to spot the correct gap, and with Porter on the wing, Stewart is able to cross over unmarked as he confirms his place as the world's best fullback. With the 14-man All Blacks struggling to contain the England attack, another try is almost certain to happen, and in the 79th minute, it indeed happens again. England's pod structure changes all of a sudden from a 3-man diamond shaped of Billy Vunipola at the front, utilised to hide Marcus Smith ahead of a significant gain in metres. While Vunipola's pass behind Smith was a little more predictable this time, it is indeed the right thing to do with 8 All Blacks packed into about 10 metres of space on Smith's left. This packing in for the All Blacks has allowed for England to get plenty of space as they've spread out wide. Smith, however, has managed the space out wide superbly well. He's not even the main distributor for this phase at all. He's suckering in the All Blacks defence so that Farrell can handle the space out wide. Smith runs a superb dummy line to engage Geordie Barrett, who commits to the tackle and leaves Anton Lienert-Brown in a one-on-one against Tom Curry, a far stronger player. This demonstrates Barrett losing his vision of the bigger picture with less space, but also Smith's world-class playmaking. While Curry is in a perfect position to run over Lienert-Brown for a 5-metre carry, Curry's long-term teamwork with Owen Farrell ensures the ball for further movement out wide, and the space isn't wasted, with Curry being one of few forwards that knows how to pass in the modern day. Farrell, Stewart and Slade are all completely unmarked, while Porter is once again up against Ioane, now out of position at 11 and far further behind his fellow defenders. Quick cover defence by Ardie Savia forces Slade to take it in after running about 20 metres, but the damage is already done with England now in the All Blacks 22. David Ribbons makes another strong carry to cross the gain line again, meaning England are now only 4 metres from the All Blacks try line. Now that this flashback to 2022 is over and we've demonstrated the key involvements of Smith and Farrell in the game ahead of Will Stewart's second try, we'll also now highlight Smith doing the right thing at the end of the game. There were indeed a few boos when the game ended, but we need to be real here. England could not have exited their 22 from this position we see in the freeze frame, with Marco Vunipola unnecessarily close to the ruck. Will Stewart and Billy Vunipola are now too far away from each other to combine, while Johnny May is marked by Va'i a lock. Meanwhile, in the blind side, Smith and the 3 other backs are marked by 6 All Blacks. Although Billy V has the impression that he can take on the All Blacks all on his zone, Smith has recognised the odds, so instead takes the draw as he'd rather not lose. This is the right thing to do. This game showed that Smith and Farrell can work together to close a game out and make a comeback while in a World Cup. This kick would work out in their favour for extra time, so it's really good to see Smith's instinct to put the team before himself. We've now finished off the footage analysis by concluding that Farrell and Smith were the puppet masters behind 10 of the 14 tries England scored against Tier 1 nations outside of Italy and Japan, with them both on the pitch together. Let's have a look at some of the stats to conclude the argument of England needing them both on the pitch. It's pretty much established that Owen Farrell is England's greatest ever player in my mind. He's about to overtake Johnny Wilkinson as the country's highest ever point scorer, which will move him up to second place in the all-time tally behind Dan Carter, the highest point scorer of all time. Farrell probably isn't going to get to Carter because of his injuries, but he's given Carter a decent run for his money. We do need to mention Smith's goal kicking though. Against the USA in 2021, he got 15 out of their 43 possible points, 18 out of 70 against Canada, 10 out of 69 against Tonga, 5 out of 32 against Australia, 12 out of 27 against South Africa, 17 out of 17 against Scotland in 2022, 13 of 33 against Italy, 18 of 23 against Wales, all of their points against Ireland, 8 from 13 against France. He only scored 1 try during the Australia series, but then that's back to 5 out of 21 for the third test due to that try. We then get to Japan, 10 out of 52, 7 out of 25 against the All Blacks, though he didn't score any points against South Africa. So in total for 2022, that was 93 points for Marcus Smith. As we can see, he's scoring a massive portion of the team's points in the Eddie Jones era. So 31.6% of all the points England scored during 2022 were scored by Marcus Smith, despite the points by Owen Farrell coming in massive droves when he was available for selection. Smith is a phenomenal goal kicker. He was the second highest point scorer in all of Test rugby for 2022. We should also possibly discuss the England tries scored post Lions tour this same time period as well, though I'm not going to count Italy and Japan there, because they kind of do distort the data a little bit. So England got 2 tries against Australia in 2021, 3 against South Africa that year. They then got 1 against Scotland in 2022, 1 against Wales, 0 against Ireland, 1 against France. They got a total of 6 in the Australia series, with the most being in the first test where there was 3. The only one in the second test was off a maul. Then they obviously got the 2 in the third test, 2 against Argentina, 3 against the All Blacks, 1 against the Springboks. So there were 20 tries in total from Eddie Jones's last 12 Tier 1 games, an average of 1.67 tries per game. That was a very common talking point amongst English fans. We don't want Eddie, we want to see more tries. No, Farrell's too slow, we want more tries. No, Marcus Smith is too individualistic, we want more tries. Well, the tries with Smith only, there were 6 tries for 1.2 per game on average. But with both of these players on the pitch within this time period, there were 14 tries against the nations other than Japan and Italy, so that's averaging 2 tries a game. With Owen Farrell at 12 and Marcus Smith at 10, the average tries scored per game goes up from 1.2 to 2. I know that it doesn't seem like a huge difference overall, but it is. As I mentioned so many times through the 2023 Six Nations, their attack looked flat. They needed more playmakers to assist in the shape of it. This video is the second part of why I was saying that through the whole Six Nations. Now we can see the evidence as to why I was making those statements the whole competition. The numberless backline in 2022 as well, we also do need to count that into the equation. It got shelved because it reduced that rate of tries. Slade, for example, he started every 2022 Six Nations game in the 12 jersey. So at the end of the day, when England do have multiple playmakers on the pitch, as we saw from the Eddie Jones era, it was increasing their rate of tries scored per game. We saw it this year. As we can see, the stats show that Steve Borthwick's England, they are clearly scoring more tries than the Eddie Jones side, now that the numberless backline, of course, now that that is gone. Borthwick, the pack is slightly better under him as well, but not by a crazy amount. So now that we've seen the improvement of tries scored under Borthwick, what's going to happen to this particular try rate if both players are in the team? I think we all know, those that have looked at this analysis in proper detail. I'm going to leave the video here for you guys to discuss in the comments. Just remember to be constructive. Obviously, there's just been a ridiculous amount of over-hate towards this combo. You can support me over on Instagram and over on Twitter, where I share my thoughts on other things. And you can also visit my opinion journalism website, where I cover New Zealand rugby matches. You can also join my patrons, who I mentioned at the start of the video. And you could just go to my PayPal tip jar if you don't want to make a monthly thing happen. Probably better get to bed there, rather, guys, so I'm going to end it off here. Cheers for watching this video from Max.